Before I start, I want to say that this is one of the best stories I've ever told. Watch till the end, and you'll know why I think so. Let's go. I realized that my wife was pretending to be someone else. Our whole marriage is a lie. But before I explain how I uncovered everything, I want to take you a little deeper into the story. Hey everyone, this is my first time posting here, and I could really use some advice. Sorry if this is a bit long, but I need to get everything off my chest. I'm 36M and my wife, who I'll call Jane, is 33F. We've been married for 8 years, and everything seemed perfect until recently, or so I thought. Jane and I met at a mutual friend's party. We hit it off instantly and started dating shortly after. It was one of those whirlwind romances that led to us getting married right after graduation. We've had our ups and downs like any couple, but I always believed we had a strong, honest relationship. That belief came crashing down about a month ago when I discovered Jane has been living a double life. It all started innocently enough. Jane's been working late a lot recently, claiming she has to stay at the office to finish projects or attend meetings. I never doubted her because she's always been dedicated to her career. But about a month ago, I started to feel like something was off. She stopped giving me blowjobs, which she always liked. This is a one-time account, so I'm willing to share all the details with you, and practically stopped talking to me altogether. Our conversations were reduced to hello, yes, and bye. One day I saw she had another phone. The one she usually used was a bit broken, but she never mentioned getting a new one. These little things made my gut say something wasn't right. One night, Jane was in the shower, and her phone buzzed with a notification. I glanced over and saw a message from someone named Kara with a profile picture of a flower. It seemed harmless, but I had never heard Jane mention anyone named Kara before. Curiosity got the better of me, so I decided to check it out. When I opened the message, I was shocked to see flirty texts, and even some explicit ones. I scrolled up and realized Kara was actually a guy she had saved under a fake name. Let's call him Mark. My heart was racing, and I felt sick to my stomach. I didn't confront her immediately. Instead, I had a full-blown panic attack, struggling to breathe and calm myself down. Over the next few days, I managed to sync her phone to my laptop, so I could read all her messages. What I found was worse than I imagined. Jane and Mark had been seeing each other for almost a year. They had met through a mutual friend and hit it off. They'd been meeting up while she was supposedly working late or out with friends. Reading their messages, I found out they even had a secret weekend getaway planned. She had told me it was a business trip. The level of detail in their planning was insane. They had code words for everything. It was like reading a script from a bad movie. The worst part was a video she sent him, recording herself masturbating and calling out his name. I downloaded the video, knowing it would be crucial for my revenge plan. I was devastated but still in shock. I needed to see this for myself, so I took a day off work and followed her when she left for her business trip. She drove to a hotel a few towns over, and sure enough, Mark was there waiting for her. They kissed and checked in together. I didn't confront them then because I didn't want to cause a scene in public. I went back home and started planning my next move. I knew I needed solid proof if I wanted to confront her and get a divorce. So I set up a hidden camera in our bedroom and another in the living room. I hated spying on her, but I felt like I had no choice. Over the next week, I captured footage of her sneaking out late at night, talking to Mark on the phone, and even inviting him over when she thought I was out. Instead of confronting her, I decided to pretend everything was fine while I prepared my plan of revenge. I'm sitting here wondering what the hell happened to my life. How did I not see this coming? Was it my fault? What do I do next? I'm back with an update. After I discovered Jane's affair, I kept digging. I wanted to know everything about Mark, so I did some research and found out that he's married with a child. His wife, let's call her Emily, and their kids seem to have no idea about his double life. This revelation hit me hard. Knowing there was another innocent person and a child involved made me feel even worse about the whole situation. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I needed to tell Emily. She deserved to know the truth. But before I could do anything, the stress of it all caused me to have another panic attack. It was worse than the first one. I felt like I couldn't breathe, and my heart was racing. I had to sit down and force myself to calm down. It took a while, but eventually, I managed to pull myself together. Once I was feeling a bit better, I decided to reach out to Emily. I found her on social media and sent her a message, asking if we could meet in person. I didn't want to explain everything over a message. She agreed to meet, and we arranged to have coffee at a local caf GC. I was nervous as hell, but I knew this was the right thing to do. When I met Emily, I was surprised. She was a young, very beautiful girl. It baffled me how Mark could trade her for my wife. Not that Jane isn't beautiful, but Emily had this fresh, natural beauty that made me question Mark's sanity. I could see the worry and confusion in her eyes as we sat down. I started by thanking her for meeting with me and then jumped straight into the tough part. I told her about Mark and Jane's affair, showing her the messages, photos, and videos I had collected. Emily sat in stunned silence, scrolling through the evidence. At first, she refused to believe it, shaking her head and muttering that Mark wouldn't do this. He loved her and their son. But as she continued to look through the damning evidence, reality started to sink in. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she looked up at me, devastated. She whispered that she didn't know what to do and asked how Mark could do this to them. I felt a pang of guilt and sadness, knowing my words had shattered her world. Despite the overwhelming pain, Emily and I decided we needed to act. They had lied to us both, and they needed to face the consequences. Over the next few days, Emily and I worked together to come up with a plan. We decided to expose their affair publicly and humiliatingly. We rented an apartment and invited all our friends and family to a party. Emily managed to get Mark to agree to come, and I convinced Jane it was just a casual get-together. The day of the party arrived, and we set up a large projector in the living room. We had all the evidence ready, the messages, the photos, and the videos. As people started arriving, Emily and I exchanged nervous glances. This was it. There was no turning back. When Jane and Mark arrived, they looked surprised to see each other. Jane shot me a confused look, but I just smiled and welcomed her in. Once everyone was settled, I stood up and cleared my throat. Thanking everyone for coming, I prepared to unveil the truth. I announced that Emily and I had something to show everyone. Emily hit play on the projector, and the room went silent as the first message appeared on the screen. It was one of the flirty texts Jane had sent to Mark. Then came more messages, followed by the explicit photos and videos. When the video of Jane masturbating and calling out Mark's name played, the room erupted into chaos. Friends and family members looked shocked, disgusted, and some even angry. There were gasps and murmurs from the crowd, and a few people left the apartment altogether. Jane turned pale, and Mark's face turned bright red with embarrassment. I could see the judgment in everyone's eyes, not just for Jane and Mark, but for the situation as a whole. Emily and I stood together, our hearts pounding but feeling a sense of justice. The aftermath of our revelation was a mix of emotions. Jane and Mark were left to face the crowd's reactions, while Emily and I slipped away, leaving the chaos behind. We stood outside, breathing in the cool night air, trying to process everything that had just happened. We felt a mix of relief and residual anger, but knew we had done the right thing. Now I'm sitting here, wondering what the next steps are. How do I move forward from this? What do I do now that my marriage is over? And most importantly, how do I start to heal from this betrayal? Any advice would be greatly appreciated. I'm back with another update. Thanks for all the support and advice on my last posts. After everything went down at the party, Jane quit her job. She's been staying at home all the time, barely leaving the bed. When I went to pick up all my things from our apartment, she was lying there, looking terrible. Dark circles under her eyes, hair a mess. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. I didn't say anything. I just silently packed my belongings. As I was leaving, Jane suddenly shouted, "You're such a monster." I didn't respond. I just closed the door and left. For the past week, I've been experiencing panic attacks every day. The stress and anxiety are overwhelming, but I don't trust psychologists or therapists, so I haven't gone anywhere for help. Instead, I've been trying to cope on my own, but it's not going well. The attacks come out of nowhere, leaving me breathless and shaking. Every day, Emily and I communicate with each other on Discord. We share our feelings and try to support each other through this mess. Emily told me that Mark hasn't shown up at their house yet. Only his parents have come by, and they don't even want to talk to him. They told Emily they would support her and the children, but said Mark is not their son anymore. Emily thinks it's probably just their emotions talking, and that they'll accept him back when he shows up. After all, they're still his parents. It's been a surreal experience, to say the least. Seeing Jane so broken, dealing with my own panic attacks, and trying to support Emily as she navigates her own turmoil. The only thing keeping me going is the hope that eventually we'll find some kind of closure. Let me take you back a bit to fill in some gaps. After the public exposure, things got even more chaotic. Jane and Mark's affair was the talk of the town. Our friends and family were in shock, and the fallout was intense. Jane tried to reach out to me several times, begging for forgiveness, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. I was too angry, too hurt. One of the toughest moments was when I went to pick up my things. Seeing Jane in that state, part of me wanted to comfort her, but I knew I couldn't. I had to stay strong and focus on moving forward. As I packed, memories of our life together flooded my mind. It was hard to reconcile the woman I once loved with the person who had betrayed me so deeply. As I left, Jane's words echoed in my mind. "You're such a monster." Was I really? I didn't think so. I was just a man trying to deal with an impossible situation the best way I knew how. Meanwhile, Emily has been dealing with her own struggles. Mark's parents have been supportive of her, but they're devastated by their son's actions. They told her they couldn't recognize him as their son anymore. Emily confided in me that she thinks they'll eventually accept him back, but for now, they're standing by her and the kids. On Discord, Emily and I have been each other's lifeline. We talk about everything, our fears, our pain, our hopes for the future. We're both trying to piece our lives back together, and having someone who truly understands what we're going through has been invaluable. One day, Emily shared that she had found a letter Mark left behind. It was a pathetic attempt at an apology, full of excuses and rationalizations. He claimed he never meant to hurt anyone, and that he got caught up in the excitement of the affair. Emily was furious. How could he think a letter like that would make things better? She decided to keep it as a reminder of why she needed to move on. My own healing process has been slow. The panic attacks are a constant reminder of the emotional toll this has taken on me. I've tried different methods to cope: meditation, exercise, even talking to a few close friends, but nothing seems to help much. The only real solace I find is in my conversations with Emily. One particularly bad night, I was in the middle of a panic attack when Emily messaged me. She could tell something was wrong and stayed online with me until I calmed down. She shared a story about her kids, something funny they did that day, and for a moment, I was able to forget about my own problems. It's moments like these that keep me going. In one of our conversations, Emily mentioned that Mark had tried to contact her parents. He was desperate to get them on his side, but they refused to talk to him. They told him he needed to face the consequences of his actions and that they couldn't support him until he made things right. It was a small victory, but it gave Emily a sense of justice. We also discussed what to do next. Emily is considering filing for divorce, but she's worried about the impact on the kids. I've been encouraging her to do what's best for her and the children, whatever that may be. For me, the divorce is inevitable. There's no way I can stay married to Jane after everything that's happened. As the days go by, I find myself reflecting on our revenge plan and its aftermath. Exposing Jane and Mark publicly was satisfying in the moment, but it hasn't brought the closure I hoped for. There's still so much pain and anger inside me. I wonder if I'll ever truly heal. In one of my darker moments, I thought about confronting Mark directly. Maybe seeing him face to face would give me some sort of release. But I know it's not worth it. He's not worth it. Instead, I've been focusing on rebuilding my life, one day at a time. I've also been thinking a lot about my future. Right now, everything feels uncertain. The idea of starting over is daunting, but it's also a chance for a fresh start. I've been looking into new job opportunities and considering moving to a new city. Maybe a change of scenery will help me move on. Through it all, Emily has been a constant source of support. We've talked about meeting in person again, maybe going for a hike or grabbing a coffee. It's strange to think that out of all this mess, I've found a new friend, someone who understands me in a way few others can. As I write this, I'm still trying to process everything that's happened. The pain, the betrayal, the chaos, it's all a lot to handle. But I'm determined to keep moving forward. There's no going back to the way things were, and maybe that's a good thing. Maybe this is a chance to build something better. Hey everyone, I'm back with another update. Thanks for all the support and advice on my last posts. In the comments under my previous post, many of you advised me to see a psychologist. I was hesitant at first, But the panic attacks were becoming unbearable, so I decided to give it a shot. The first psychologist I saw seemed fine at first. We talked heart to heart, and he gave me some advice that seemed useful. But at the end of the session, I noticed him glancing at his watch, and then he said something like, "Well, I have to run. I get it. He's human too and has other clients. But for some reason, I thought my story was special because it's me." That experience left me feeling like just another case in a long line of patients, so I didn't go back to him. Then I found another psychologist, and this one felt like a godsend. From the very first session, I felt better. We connected on a deeper level, and I felt truly heard. He helped me work through some of the trauma and anxiety I was experiencing. It wasn't a magic cure, but it was a significant step in the right direction. Meanwhile, I decided to meet up with Emily in person again. We'd been each other's support system through all of this, and meeting face-to-face felt like the natural next step. When we met, I realized that I had fallen in love with her. It wasn't just the shared pain that brought us together. It was something deeper. Emily is kind, understanding, and resilient. She's been through hell, just like me, and somehow, we found solace in each other. 3 days after Emily and I started dating, we kissed for the first time. It felt like the most natural thing in the world. For a moment, all the pain and betrayal faded away, and there was just us. It was a brief escape from the chaos, and I cherished every second of it. Despite everything, Mark had returned to Emily's house. He was staying on the sofa on the ground floor. Emily told me she felt sorry for him, and if it weren't for the children, she would have kicked him out. It was a complicated situation, and I understood her reasons. The kids needed stability, even if it meant having Mark around for a little longer. Amidst all this, I had to meet Jane to discuss our divorce and the division of property. We tried to keep it civil, but it quickly escalated into shouting and manipulation. Jane was desperate to hold on to whatever she could, trying to guilt me into giving her more than her fair share. It was a messy, painful conversation, and by the end of it, I felt drained and defeated. After that exhausting meeting, Emily and I continued to support each other through all of this. We'd talk for hours, trying to make sense of our feelings and what our futures might look like. It wasn't easy, but having her by my side made it bearable. We both knew we had a long road ahead, but we were ready to face it together. Every day was a struggle, but slowly, I started to see glimpses of hope. The panic attacks became less frequent, and I began to feel a sense of normalcy returning to my life. Emily and I made plans for the future, dreaming of a life free from the shadows of our pasts. Despite everything, the second psychologist I found was a different story. From the very first session, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. We delved into my anxiety, my panic attacks, and the trauma of the betrayal. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. This therapist seemed to understand me on a deeper level, and I finally felt like I was on the path to healing. As for Emily and me, our relationship has grown deeper and more meaningful. Meeting her again and realizing I had fallen in love was both exhilarating and terrifying. 3 days after we officially started dating, we kissed for the first time. That kiss was a moment of pure magic. It felt like a beacon of light in the midst of all the darkness surrounding us. I couldn't believe how quickly my feelings for her had developed, but it felt right. Emily's situation with Mark is complicated. Despite everything, she couldn't just kick him out. Their children needed stability, and for now, Mark was sleeping on the sofa in the living room. Emily told me she felt sorry for him, which I understood. Despite his betrayal, Mark was still the father of her children. However, she made it clear that if it weren't for the kids, she would have thrown him out without hesitation. Our discussions about the future were filled with dreams and hopes. We talked about moving to a new city, starting fresh, and leaving the past behind us. It was comforting to imagine a future where the pain of betrayal was just a distant memory. The divorce negotiations with Jane were a nightmare. We had initially agreed to meet and discuss things civilly, but it quickly turned into a shouting match. Jane was desperate to hold on to everything she could, using guilt and manipulation to try and sway me. She accused me of abandoning her when she needed me the most, conveniently ignoring the fact that she was the one who had destroyed our marriage. By the end of the meeting, I was emotionally exhausted and felt like we had made no progress. Despite the chaos, Emily has been my rock. We continue to talk every day, sharing our fears, frustrations, and hopes. Her support has been invaluable, and I don't know how I would have managed without her. We've both been through so much, and knowing that we're facing this together makes it a bit more bearable. In addition to my personal struggles, I've been trying to stay focused on my job. Work has been a welcome distraction, but there are moments when the weight of everything hits me. The panic attacks have become less frequent, thanks to the help of my psychologist, but they still catch me off guard sometimes. Each time, I remind myself to breathe, to take it one step at a time, and to lean on the support system I have. Emily and I have also been planning a small getaway, just the two of us. We both need a break from the constant stress and turmoil. A change of scenery might be exactly what we need to recharge and refocus. It's something to look forward to, and for now, that's enough to keep me going. As I write this, I'm still processing everything that's happened. The journey isn't over, but I'm starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, things will be okay. Thanks for reading, and for all the support. It means more than you know. I'll keep you posted on how things go from here. Hey everyone, I'm back with another update. Things have taken an unexpected turn, and I really need to get this off my chest. A few days ago, I went to visit Emily. We had been each other's rock through this mess, but when I arrived, I sensed something was off. I knocked on her door, and to my surprise, Mark answered. He told me that Emily didn't want to talk to me. I couldn't believe it. After everything we had been through, she wouldn't even see me. I started shouting, "Emily, come out, let's talk." I must have sounded desperate, but I didn't care. I needed to see her, to understand what was going on. After about 2 minutes, Emily finally came out. She looked tired and worn out, like she hadn't slept in days. We stood there in awkward silence for a moment, before she finally spoke. "I need to think about the future," she said. "I have a husband and kids. They should have a dad and mom. I have nothing more to say to you." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. She wasn't just distancing herself, she was cutting me off entirely. Before I could say anything else, she added, "Forget it all." I was left standing there, stunned. The whole situation with Emily hit me harder than anything that had happened with Jane. Losing her support felt like losing everything all over again. I had fallen in love with her, and now she was telling me to forget it all. I felt like my world was crumbling for the second time. Feeling completely lost, I decided it was time to start preparing for the inevitable divorce with Jane. I contacted a lawyer and began discussing my options. It was another painful step, but I knew it had to be done. The lawyer explained the process, and I realized that the road ahead would be long and grueling. But I was ready to face it. I had no choice. The emotional toll of losing Emily was unbearable. It was as if all the progress I had made with my psychologist was undone in an instant. The panic attacks returned with a vengeance, and I found myself struggling to get through each day. The betrayal by Jane was one thing, but feeling abandoned by Emily, someone who truly understood my pain, was almost too much to bear. I decided to take some time off work and went to stay with my parents. I needed to get away from everything and everyone, to clear my head and figure out what to do next. My parents were incredibly supportive. They had been following the whole saga and understood the depth of my pain. Being back home was comforting, but it also brought back a flood of memories from simpler times when life wasn't so complicated. My mom tried to lift my spirits by keeping me busy with small tasks around the house. My dad took me on long walks, and we talked about everything but the current mess. It was a temporary escape, but it helped, at least for a while. But even at my parents' house, I couldn't escape my thoughts. I kept replaying my conversation with Emily over and over in my head. Her words echoed in my mind. "I need to think about the future. I have a husband and kids. They should have a dad and mom." It felt like she was telling me that our relationship was a mistake, that it was something that never should have happened. It was hard to accept, but I knew I had to. One evening, while I was sitting in the living room, my mom handed me a box of old family photos. She thought it might cheer me up to look through them. As I flipped through the pictures, I saw a photo of Jane and me from our wedding day. We looked so happy, so full of hope for the future. It was heartbreaking to see how much had changed. I set the photo aside and continued looking through the box. I needed to remind myself of who I was before all of this, to find some sense of identity outside of the pain and betrayal. As I was packing my things, I found a note that Emily had written me months ago. It was a small note, just a few lines telling me how much she appreciated having me in her life. Reading it now felt bittersweet. It was a reminder of what we had shared, but also of what was now lost. I put the note in my bag, deciding that I wasn't ready to let go of that memory just yet. I tried to focus on the future, even though it felt incredibly uncertain. My lawyer had given me a lot to think about regarding the divorce. Jane and I would need to discuss the division of property, and I knew it wouldn't be easy. She was already trying to manipulate me into giving her more than her fair share. She accused me of abandoning her, of not being there when she needed me. It was infuriating, but I knew I had to stay strong. The conversations with my lawyer were difficult but necessary. We talked about everything from the house to the bank accounts to our shared belongings. I knew that this process would take time, but I was ready to see it through. I couldn't let Jane's manipulations get to me. I had to be firm and protect my interests. Back at my parents' house, I spent a lot of time reflecting on everything that had happened. The affair, the public exposure, the fallout with Emily, and now the impending divorce. It was a lot to process. I found myself talking to my mom a lot. She was a great listener, and her advice was always gentle and wise. She reminded me that healing takes time and that it was okay to feel lost and uncertain. I also reconnected with some old friends. They had been there for me through thick and thin, and their support meant the world to me. We met up a few times, and they did their best to take my mind off things. It was good to laugh again, to feel a sense of normalcy, even if it was just for a little while. As the days passed, I started to see a glimmer of hope. The pain was still there, but it wasn't as overwhelming as it had been. My sessions with my psychologist continued to be a source of strength. We talked about my feelings of abandonment, my fears for the future, and my struggles with panic attacks. Slowly but surely, I was starting to feel a bit more like myself. But then came the moment I had been dreading, another meeting Jane to discuss the divorce. We agreed to meet at a neutral location to keep things civil. I went in with a clear head and a plan, determined to stay calm and rational. But as soon as we sat down, Jane started with the accusations and manipulations. She claimed that I was abandoning her, that I was leaving her with nothing. She tried to guilt me into giving her more than what was fair. It quickly escalated into a shouting match. I was trying to keep my cool, but it was hard when she was pushing all my buttons. By the end of it, I felt drained and defeated. We had made no progress, and it felt like we were back at square one. I knew that this was just the beginning and that I had a long road ahead of me. Emily had been my rock. But now, with Emily pulling away, I felt more alone than ever. The support I had come to rely on was suddenly gone, and I was left to navigate this mess on my own. The situation with Emily hit me harder than anything that had happened with Jane. Losing her felt like losing everything all over again. Hey everyone, this will be my last update. Today, I want to share the conclusion of this chapter of my life. As the court date approached, I was a bundle of nerves. My parents arrived a few days before the court proceedings were set to start, and their support was invaluable. They had been following my ordeal closely and understood the depth of my pain. Their presence was comforting, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this fight. The morning of the court date, I was pacing around my apartment, trying to calm my nerves. Suddenly, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. Hesitantly, I answered. To my surprise, it was Emily. I didn't have her number because we had only communicated on Discord, and after our fallout, I had deleted and blocked her. Hearing her voice brought a rush of emotions. I just wanted to wish you victory, she said softly. Her words were unexpected, but comforting in a strange way. Thank you, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper, and then I hung up. The call left me feeling a mix of hope and sadness. It was a reminder of what could have been, but also a push to keep moving forward. When I arrived at the courthouse, my parents were already there, waiting for me. Their reassuring smiles gave me the strength I needed to face Jane one last time. As we entered the courtroom, I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me. The room felt cold and sterile, a stark contrast to the emotional chaos within me. The proceedings began, and it was simply unbearable to be there. Jane and her lawyer presented their case, full of accusations and attempts to paint me as the villain. They argued that I was abandoning her, leaving her with nothing, and that she deserved more than her fair share of our assets. It was hard to sit there and listen to the distortions and manipulations, but I knew I had to stay strong. When it was my turn, my lawyer laid out the facts clearly and logically. We presented the evidence of Jane's affair, her attempts to manipulate me, and the true state of our finances. It was painful to relive everything, but necessary to ensure a fair outcome. Throughout the process, I kept glancing at my parents. Their unwavering support was a beacon of hope in that dim, oppressive room. The judge listened carefully to both sides, asking questions and reviewing the evidence. Time seemed to stretch on forever, each minute feeling like an hour. Finally, the moment of truth arrived. The judge began to speak, and my heart pounded in my chest. He acknowledged the complexities of the case, but ultimately, he ruled in my favor. The relief was overwhelming. After months of turmoil and uncertainty, I had won. As I walked out of the courtroom, I felt a mix of exhaustion and elation. My parents hugged me tightly, their pride and relief evident. The victory was bittersweet, a reminder of the cost of betrayal and the pain of letting go. In the days that followed, I began to reflect on everything that had happened, the roller coaster of emotions, the unexpected twists and turns, and the lessons I had learned along the way. Life, I realized, is the most unpredictable thing. One day, everything might go your way, and the next, you might lose everything. I have no grand conclusion. I've lived long enough to know that finding the right key to life is elusive. Maybe I never will. But what I do know is that I've come out of this ordeal stronger and more resilient. The support of my parents, the brief but meaningful connection with Emily, and the hard-won victory in court have all shaped me in ways I couldn't have imagined. Looking back, there were moments when I thought I wouldn't make it through. The panic attacks, the sleepless nights, and the overwhelming sense of loss were almost too much to bear. But here I am, standing on the other side of the storm, bruised, but not broken. As I close this chapter, I want to thank all of you who have followed my story, offered advice, and provided support. Your words meant more than you know. For anyone going through something similar, know that there is light at the end of the tunnel, even if it feels impossible to see right now. Life is unpredictable, and we can't always control what happens to us. But we can control how we respond, how we grow, and how we move forward. I'm ready to face whatever comes next, and I hope that my story can offer a glimmer of hope to those who need it.